Good evening, everyone. I am Jamie Womack Williams. I'm the State Education Issues Director for the Bridges Institute here at Texas A&T. Tonight, we have our two wonderful trainers that were with us 2 weeks ago, and they've come back for another round to bring you beyond classroom management. This is probably one of my favorite courses that we offer because it really kind of goes in depth to, about managing behaviors within your classroom. So we have Rebecca Salazar Fierce and Carol Villarreal again tonight. And also with us, I have Dr. Claudia Morales, who I work alongside each and every day to pull off these professional development events. So thank you for joining us. I know it's been a long day for you all, and we appreciate y'all taking the time to come and spend with us. As always, I will be keeping attendance on my end. At the 1 hour mark is when I take attendance, and then I will email you a certificate either tonight if I get them done during the session, or it will be tomorrow. And then Dr. Morales, after our communications team uploads it to our YouTube channel, she will send you all of the handouts along with the link to the video so that you can go back and review it. So with that, Rebecca and Carol, I will turn it over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm Rebecca Salazar Fierce. It's nice to be here with you all again. Hi, Gina. It's good to see you. I do want to let you guys know that the participant handbook has been put, the link to it has been put in the chat by Carol. We will be referring to it as we go through the session. I do want to let you know I'm coming to you from El Paso, Texas. I am an 18-year veteran teacher. This is my 4th year working for Texas Bridges Institute, and then also for National as well. And my co-host is Carol.
Hi, my name is Carol Villarreal. Excuse me. I am a reading specialist at John Jay High School in Northside ISD in San Antonio. And I've been working with National and Texas AFT for about 4 years. I think we're about the same year. Thank you for coming. You will see the link to the handbook and a separate link for the handouts. When I scanned them, I couldn't scan them together. So there's 2 links there.
Thank you, Carol. So I just want to welcome you to our Strategies for Student Success series. It's a research-based program that consists of modules that address teaching and learning aspects of the classroom that are both relevant to new and veteran teachers. We're designed to deliver them in 3 hours, but we're going to try to condense that down to the 2 hours and get you guys the best experience that you have, but we do want to honor your time, and we thank you for being here with us. I do want to ask that you remember this is an informal session. If you need to step away, go ahead and do that. Take care of your needs, your comforts. If you need to go grab a glass of water, go ahead and do that. This is a non-threatening environment. And so there are no stupid questions. You can ask whatever you need to. We are here to help you. That's what we're doing today. We're going to keep an open mind. That way we can take what we're learning and we can apply it.
I'm going to run to the library, okay?
Oh. And then we are going to ask that you please participate whenever we have discussions. You can go ahead and you can unmute yourself. You can type in the chat. And then we also want to make sure that you put your cell phones on vibrate. That way you're paying attention to what's going on here, the work that we're doing. In our handbook, we do have some articles we'll be referring to. We'll be reading through that, and then we're going to be asking for you to discuss. I do want to let you know there are some breakouts, or there's some areas where we're supposed to be kind of grouped together, but we're going to try to keep it together as a whole group just to kind of make sure we stay on time. So I'd like to ask you to look at the objectives that we have up on the screen. And I'd like to invite, hold on. I'd like to invite you to read them with me. So if you'd like to, you can read the objectives. Give me a second. Okay, so can I have a volunteer for the first objective?
By the end of this session, participants will be able to connect classroom management with student achievement.
Thank you. The second one?
I'll read. Demonstrate how managerial and instructional considerations affect the learning environment.
Thank you, Miss Gina. And their third one?
Engage educators in reflecting on how their response to situational triggers affect the classroom environment.
And our fourth one.
I'll read the last one. Use
Thank-
the layout of the classroom and efficient use of rules, procedures, and consequences to positively impact the learning environment, relationship building, and student growth.
Thank you. So I want to ask you if you think that these objectives will cover what you wanted to see or what you wanted to get out of the session focus, right? This is what we're looking at. Is this what you were kind of hoping to find? And then I would ask you to go ahead and unmute, or you can share in the chat. And is there anything you don't see on the list that you're maybe thinking, hey, what about this?
This is good. This is part of my BOY.
Mm-hmm.
I think with student management, your test grades will go up higher because the students will be more useful and you'll be more useful. You'll be less working on behavior and working more on instructing and being centered, being student centered. So this is perfect.
I love that, Gina. So yes, like when we make sure that we have our classroom management down, then we can not have to worry about that. And now we can kind of make sure that we're concentrating on content areas, correct? And then we have some of our participants, they're participating in the chat, and we do have Charlie who said yes, definitely to all. And then Beth who says, yes, I'm interested in this. Thank you so much for letting us know and just making sure that we are covering what it is that you're hoping to get from our session. So I do want to remind you that the work of AFT, so all of these modules that we write for you are research-based. Therefore, we do want to let you know that we have this module put together and it's a compilation of the work of all of these researchers. And I want to invite you to look at some of the names. Do you recognize any of them? I know all of us kind of remember Vygotsky, so he was the father of like this kind of study. So I remember sitting in school and learning about him. Anybody else? Dweck, I see Beth talking about Dweck, that she recognizes that researcher's name. Anybody else? So as you see, some of the names are some of those names we heard when we were in college, like years back. So this research is seminal research, meaning it's been proven time and again over populations, over time. And it's level 3 research, which means that they've been able to really study this. This is not just somebody's, you know, real quick, let me see how I'm going to make money. Let's jump on the bandwagon type of research that we see nowadays. This is level 3 seminal research. It's been proven. There's been monies that have been invested into making sure that the research is there. The other stuff that we have, there is some that's older, but it's because it has withstood the test of time. I'm sorry. And also we have newer ones like Duckworth, who is one of the newer researchers who has done work on grit and how growth mindset also plays into behavioral studies. And I see Carol saying she's heard of Tomlinson too. So we do want to remind you that we do not ever just give you what is the latest craze. We give you what is research based. That being said, I'd like to ask you to look at some of the questions we have here. We have 3 questions and you can just popcorn it out. You can unmute or you can again choose to type it in if you need to, the chat. So we're going to respond to the questions. The first one is, what comes to mind when you hear the term classroom management? So I'm going to let that percolate in your mind for a couple seconds. And then, what are some attributes of a well-run classroom? And the third is, what classroom management indicators on the teacher evaluation do teachers struggle with the most? And with this third question, I do want to point you to the chat where Carol has kindly shared the link to the T-test rubric, and that is what we're evaluated on. So you have all the dimensions that we are evaluated on. And if you need to reference it, just to kind of think about that, like what indicators or what are those dimensions that teacher evaluation, those rubrics, where do they struggle the most, you know? And I'm going to invite you to go ahead and just share as you'd like to about these questions.
Well, for number one, what comes to mind when you hear the term classroom management? I thought it was my class, all the years that I've been teaching, where the kids come in, they are clear with the routine and procedures, until I got a whole different design of students. I have special ed population.
Mm-hmm.
This year, I mean, I haven't had it in 13 years. And I'm telling you, I feel like I don't have classroom management all of a sudden. The kids, their behaviors are just coming out left, right, and it's overwhelming right now. I came home thinking, okay, I got to do something else, because as usual, I do the expectations every day just to remind them I have the rules out, the classroom rules, and so that doesn't seem to be working. Plus, we're doing TLAC, teach like a champion. Greeting the kids at the threshold. But with these group of kids, it seems like I need to come up with something else creative to get their attention.
Something more tailored to their needs, correct?
Yes.
I feel that, Gina, because I taught first grade forever, and I was teaching first grade when I moved down to the pre-K 3 babies. So I get what you're talking about. Like, I knew what I was doing, and when I worked with the babies, I was like, what in the world is going on, right? So you just kind of have to change it up according to what your students' needs are. And so you find what works for them. Thank you very much. I do see in the chat we have a few comments. So we have Rachel, who said, number one, systems and procedures that allow for students to spend the most amount of time on task, and also students have a predictability that respects them as people and scholars. So I like how you're talking about routine. You're talking about that they know what to expect. It's not just like, oh, what's going to happen today, or we don't have any expectations. They kind of have some sort of predictability, and they know what those systems are that are in place. I see Lisa, who said number one is a classroom that runs smoothly without behavioral issues from students. Okay. And I agree with that, because for the most part, your student behaviors are going to not be impacting your learning, but it's also what you're putting into place to make sure you mitigate any kind of unforeseen situations, correct? So sometimes we might have student behaviors, but is it going to deter us from being able to teach? And then we have Elizabeth, who said relationships and consistency. I love this, Elizabeth. Yes, definitely. Classroom management depends quite a bit on your relationship with their students and then with you. And Lisa Molina is two relationships for the second one. She says relationships with students, right? So number two, the attributes of a well-run classroom is you're kind of displaying that there's a working relationship with your students, right? And it's mutually respectable.
And
then,
two, what my husband's also a teacher, and what we've been working on too is like that nothing phases us. that
Right.
it's always keeping calm and collected. And especially with my preschoolers, asking them what's going on, because there's usually a reason why, and getting to know that child and figuring out what's going on.
Making them feel safe, correct? Yeah. And I think
Yes.
a lot of that, your first month is you literally letting them know this is a safe space. And we're gonna take care of you no matter what. So I just want to invite you to interact with me on number 3. What classroom management indicators on the T-test do you feel teachers struggle with the most?
I wanted to say, I just moved up to 6th grade. So I
Mhm.
taught 5th grade for 2 years, and then now I'm at 6th grade. And I'm at a blended learning campus. So I really like on the T-test where it talks about student-centered, because we do have that and bringing out that leadership in them. So that's one that I see where I'm not gonna I don't struggle with it currently, but I could see where, that would be one that I would want to make sure that I'm kind of implementing and guiding the students to be that leader.
I like that. And I do agree because even with the little ones where they'll ask us like, how are you going to work on this so that they can start managing themselves? So even within center time, how are they going to manage themselves at their centers and making sure that they're getting where they need to be without interrupting, without it being the entire year of you telling them, hey, this is where you need to be. Hey, this is what you need to be doing, right? So I like that, and that's true, Charlie. That is one of the things that I do see being asked quite a bit. How are you going to make this more student-centered instead of it just being focused on what you are doing?
I have a question or a comment. I'm listening to the student center and making them feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
But if students say, a lot of the students say, well, the reason I act this way because I have ADHD, or it's already implanted. Someone implanted in their minds that it's okay for them to act these ways because they have these certain medical issues. And so it's almost like they act on it purposely because they can, because I'm this, I'm that.
And that's something we're going to be touching on, Gina, because we talk about growth mindset, right? So we are not stagnant creatures. We are malleable, right? Our brains are malleable and we can change the way we think. So thank you for bringing that up. And with that, I'm going to ask you, we're going to look at our handbook. So I know that Carol put it in the chat and it's on pages 2 and 3. It's a classroom management through a different lens, right? An unusual look. And we're asking for you to take a look at that. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. Just go ahead and scan it. What are some terms and concepts that resonate with you while you're reading this? And when we're done with those 2 minutes, we'll go ahead and give you time as a group to discuss. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes and we're just scanning and underlining what we see that resonates with us.
Hey, Rebecca, Beth has a question if it's on page 6 or 7.
It's page 2 and 3. It should be on the bottom corner of your handbook. They have pages, so it may not be the exact page that you're looking on for the top part, but it's going to be down on the very bottom of the right. And it says Part A, Classroom Management Through a Different Lens. Does that make sense, Beth?
I see the pages at the bottom now. On
Yeah.
the actual document, it has page
It
7.
changes it, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay, I know you guys might be finishing up reading. And as you're finishing up that reading, I'm gonna ask you, and you can share out once you're done, how is each term used in the current system of education? So those terms that you were talking about, how is it used in the current system of education? So for example, I know they talk about the learning goal, right? How is that used within the system of education? And how about compliance? So stuff like that that you were reading about. What did you underline and how is it being used in the system of education? Or even just your thoughts on it.
When I think of compliance, I think of the kids, being on board with the rules,
Mm-hmm.
and your expectations. But I was just reading a little further that they're saying you need more of buy-ins with the kids rather than compliance. And it's crazy because I think it comes and goes for me because of the years. Every time, the year comes up, they change things. We change how things work, like we're doing TLAC and getting the kids very comfortable in our classroom, making them feel special. But I still didn't think about autonomy versus compliance until I just read it. And my head is already going, okay, I can do this. I can change this around from being strict on complying because I'm like kind of like a militant a little bit. And maybe I need to ease up on more of the rules and more based on buy-ins and getting the kids to relate to what we're doing, something relevant and getting them more engaged.
Definitely. Because when you're looking at compliance, you're looking at somebody who's behaving. Well, I could be behaving. I could be sitting in my seat, being quiet, not playing with anything, not interrupting, not bothering anybody else. But does that necessarily mean that I'm learning in your classroom? And does that necessarily mean that I'm connecting to what you're teaching? Right? So it's kind of like a mind shift. So I think for the longest, when we get evaluated, sometimes they're like, oh, well, you know what? Like, there's a lot of noise. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean there's no learning going on just because there's a lot of noise. What if the chatter that's going on in your classroom is related directly to what you're teaching, right? Or what if that chatter has to do with like somebody helping who's a second language learner understand what you're talking about? So we kind of have to look at what's going on and how we're expecting the kiddos to behave, and then also saying like, hey, is it okay simply to have compliant behavior? Do we need to make sure that we're doing what we can to engage them, right? Anybody else have any other thoughts they'd like to share on this article? Those terms that you were reading?
So if you guys read the chat, I just showed up late because I stopped by the pharmacy on the way home. But I'm going to build off of what Ms. Costin just said. It's me. Hi. I was here last time. So so if you were here last time and you heard me talk about my experiment with student-led classroom procedures, I'm finding that giving some students the kind of like these not classroom jobs per se, because that like turns into here's the stuff I don't want to do and then I give it to you so you do it. But I have implemented 4 classroom culture cops to help kind of mind the room, and I've been doing that for about a week and a half. The 4 culture cops totally buy into it, and they've got different personalities. Like there's a couple of them that are like, yes, I totally am here to have power to make people do what they're supposed to do. And everybody else is kind of like, you know, well, now he's got 4 minions, you know. And so I've found so far that with my experiments with this student buy-in to it, the minute these 4 people with 4 different personalities felt empowered and like they were part of the plan for the room, they were all over it. So I'm looking forward to trying to roll out my other classroom jobs here soon in the next few days to see, so I can get that buy-in to more than just the 4 enforcers.
I love that, James, making them a part of your classroom so that they feel not just a part of it, but like they're actually making a difference within your classroom. Like they have some power too. It's not just, oh, you're giving us these assignments. Like that's beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else want to share their thoughts? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and continue on. Just now that we've had that in our mind, that we kind of have that mind shift and we're opening up our thinking, right? To look at it a different way. Carol?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have that slide in my text. I don't know what happened. We're looking at these terms, concepts, terms. Can any of you tell me what you think these mean when thinking about things that happen in the classroom when it comes to discipline, classroom management?
Well, carrot and stick, maybe we should go in order, but I went to the end.
No, that's
Carrot-
fine.
Carrot and stick is you offer them something in return for their performance or their willingness to follow through on a task.
Like if you do this, you'll get this type of thing.
Yeah. I'll take you
Yes.
outside for 10 minutes if you
Yes.
get this work done.
What about Goldilocks? What do you think Goldilocks tasks means? Think of Goldilocks and the 3 bears.
We
What do you think
chased
that
them out of the room for taking our stuff and using our furniture.
They break all my stuff. Just kidding. So
Or
when we
compliant?
just finished the Goldilocks and the 3 Bears story in our class, because they're pre-K kiddos. And so when we're talking about Goldilocks, we look at Baby Bear always saying that Goldilocks stuff is just right for him, right? Because it's things are too hot or too cold for Mama Bear and Papa Bear, but they're just right for Baby Bear. Everybody is, the bed is too soft or too hard, but it's just right for Baby Bear. So kind of looking at who they are and what they need and what is just right for them.
When you think of compliance, what do you guys think when it comes to classroom management, classroom discipline?
Silent obedience, without question.
No, not in my class. I've just been listening because I am a special needs teacher, and that doesn't always mean they can be obedient, but they're still going to make noises. They're still going to move around and stuff like that. So it has to be more of what you have to also look at what each child needs as far as sensory, because some of them need to be able to fidget. So, but you have to be able to find what is the fidget that they can use to help them focus, yet not make a bunch of noise and stuff like that. And so, you know, we do a lot of that, and we do the token boards and all of
with
that, right?
Yeah, with that being said, Michelle, I'm wondering, like, also what's coming into my mind is what our view of compliance going to cause our students more anxiety or
Yes.
to help them, you know?
Yeah, no, a lot of it is because it's too confining with a lot of the sensory issues that are going on. And so compliance for each child can look very, very different. I have a kid right now that we're just training him to be in an area. So I box off, you know, a space on the carpet with tape or Velcro, and you need to be in that space. If you need to stand, stand. You need to sit on carpet, sit on carpet. You need to sit in a chair, sit in a chair, twirl on your butt, whatever. But you have to be in that area. You don't like looking at the screen, that's fine. You listen, and if you still answer the question. So, you know, we're working on behavior being able to comply. So you have to take baby steps too with a lot of it, you know, but because what happened, I am actually autistic myself. And so a lot of those same things where the boss is wanting you to be compliant and different things, it sets me off. So, you know, I've had a meltdown the last few days, and I just had to go to the principal and say, look, you know, y'all need to back off because y'all are creating more stress for me. I'm having meltdowns. I'm having a panic attack. You know, y'all got to give me a chance to do what you asked me to do, you know, and keep all your side comments to yourself. You know, and so it is. And so I have another student that because of this student's behavior, she has a lot of anxiety. So how am I supposed to ask that child, you know, do you eat your food? Oh, well, I've been crying for the last while because the child keeps doing this and that and scaring me. So I've been crying, you know, I need you to concentrate. I can't concentrate because I flinch every time I see the kid walk by, right? So I have to be able to do something different. We need to move out of a particular area, move to a safer place for that child. And so sometimes, you know, it's just all very different. And you have to see when you're talking about the behaviors, you also have to sometimes let the behavior play out because you have to be very conscious, how do you say, be very observant to see what is the function of the behavior. So last week, for instance, when it's quiet in the room and the child walks over to the big table, he pushes it. We kindly move the baby out of the way. And then he flips it. He turns it over, flips the chairs, knocks it on the floor, twirls things around, pulls the table all the way over. And I just told my parent, I said, no. I said, let him do it. No one's over there. No one's going to get hurt. I need to find out why is he doing this. And he did something that I saw that registered with me. And I said, go get a pillow. And I said, now go get that blanket right there. And she said, but, I said, just go put it on. So what he did is the table is upside down and he moved it to a specific place. He was sleepy. He crawled up on it with his blanket to go to sleep.
He made his own bed.
He removed the mat from the room because he had knocked things over with it. So he turned the table over and moved it to a different area so that he could lay down to take a nap. So now, you know, we have to, then we start seeing like, okay, what are the behaviors that are starting oh my gosh, he's sleepy. So then you can start to cut them. Like once you start realizing what the function is behind it, then when you see certain things happening, which would now be your antecedent, you can jump in the middle and help him out. And to be able to, oh, come on, let's go get the blanket. You know, we don't have to knock over the whole table. We'll get you something over there, you know, and stuff like that. So sometimes you just have to be very patient. And sometimes, you know, I have another student, he is a wander. He's listening, he's paying attention. He can answer your questions, but he has to move. And so he'll walk laps around the room. He's not hurting anybody, he's not doing anything, but he has to move. So his obedience looks different than the other child who is just simply sitting in her chair. They're both being obedient.
I love that, Michelle, because you're literally hitting on the fact that in our behavioral, like our plan, when we're looking at the behavior, is we need to have customization, like not so much standardization. And we really need to be looking. So again, like within what we just read, talking about, are we looking at a performance goal? So are they on grade level and getting an A, or is there a learning goal? Are we learning something new, right? What are you supposed to be learning? Are you growing as a student, right? So
Right.
I love how like what you just said literally just kind of took us through all of this. Like we do have rigor, but it could be looking different for each student that's in our classroom.
Yeah, because I'm that teacher that, you know, I don't want the other kids to know that someone else has a plan that's slightly different. We're
Yeah.
all working on Goldilocks.
Yeah.
But one child I might be asking to underline a sentence. Another child I might simply be asking to underline a word. And another child might be actually just, can you find the letter A, or can you find a capital letter? But then I just have that other child that says, can you point to the picture? Where's Goldilocks?
Definitely. So that's
You know?
exactly what we're talking about. And I'm gonna let Carol go ahead and let you guys talk about this because that was a great introduction. So I really want to thank you, Michelle, because you did
Oh,
it.
you're welcome.
Okay, so we have instructional considerations and managerial considerations. Would someone be able to tell me, what do you think those two mean before we go more in depth into them? So when you think of instructional considerations and managerial considerations, what do you think those two things mean?
The instructional side is probably like your standards, what the kids are expected to know by the end of the course. And managerial considerations are, how does the classroom need to run in order for to provide the best learning environment for the kids?
Thank you very much. So we're going to first take closely look at the instructional considerations. So under instructional considerations, we have group focus and avoiding satiation. Under group focus, we've got format, alerting, accountability. Under avoiding satiation, we have progress, balance, challenge, arousal, and variety. And let's just take a look at what these each mean, just to give you some information about that. Under format, that means it refers to the lesson design. Alerting refers to attention, grabbing techniques like an anticipatory set. Accountability, ensuring everyone does the work. Progress is assess students' rate of mastery. Balance or challenge arousal, raising student curiosity for the next activity. And then variety, including different activities. So let's think about how these apply to the classroom. So we're going to do a little activity, and you can either unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. I want you to use one of the indicators from either group focus or avoiding satiation techniques to complete the following STEM. I am implementing blank when I blank. So here's an example. I am implementing group alerting when I ask an anticipatory question. So Rebecca, if you can move back to the other screen so that way they can see the topics. Thank you. So can someone tell me, when you format, when I am implementing format, I am implementing format when can you fill in that blank for me? Can someone, or any of them?
I heard format, so I guess something on my mind in regards to that would be sentence stems. Stop me if I'm off base, but something that's a drive with what I'm doing this year, and the programs I'm involved with involve conversations between students. And so I guess something that resembles format with that would be sentence stems for how to have an academic conversation. How do you agree with others? How do you disagree with others? Here is how you start your sentence, and do so respectfully.
Yes, definitely, because formatting is the lesson design. So perfect. Thank you for that example. Can someone give me another example of you're implementing blank when I blank?
So I'm gonna say I am implementing valence and challenge arousal when I find playlists of songs or dances that have to do with what we're learning about. So this week we're talking about pets, and my kids get super psyched up when we do our dances or are singing our songs about pets. And so their babies, they go nuts over this. And we do this weekly. We change the playlist of what we're going to be singing or what we're going to be dancing to based on whatever our theme is for that week.
Thank you, Rebecca. I can give an example from my class. I am implementing progress when I give an assessment because I'm looking for mastery.
I am implementing accountability when I ask a student to read where I left off at.
Make sure they're paying attention.
I've put stop and jots midway through my social studies lessons, and where I ask them a critical thinking question about why do you think they did this? You know, everything I just taught you. Why do you think people in the past did this? And then I cold call people. I'm like, well, what did you write? So and so, and then they answer, and they have all learned that it's best to have an answer for me if I ask them. So just sharing your thoughts with the group is one way I do that.
That's a good example of variety as well, because that's a different kind of activity. Also, it could go under accountability because you're making sure that they're actually doing the work because you're going to call on them. Good job. I do appreciate you guys sharing your ideas. So now we're going to watch a couple videos on grit and growth mindset, which are two skills that need to be taught for students to be successful and will help with the management of your classroom. So let's take a look at our first video on Duckworth, from Duckworth about grit.
Grit, put simply, is perseverance and passion for very long-term goals. To say a few more words about it, grit is really about your stamina. How consistently you're working in a certain direction and then how hard you're working in that direction. It is not about intensity. I've had young people come to me after talks and say, well, let me just tell how gritty I am. I spent 72 hours without sleeping and I did this amazing thing, and I congratulate them, but I say, so what did you do the next week? And how many years have you been working on this? So when we assess grit by looking at people's biographies, for example, we don't necessarily look for bursts of unusual productivity or effort, but we really look for constancy of effort over time. I have actually for several years been grappling with the question of whether virtues like grit are only virtues in the middle of the spectrum. So do we have something like the Aristotelian notion of the golden mean, where excessive grit as well as insufficient grit are both bad? I've lately come to the opinion, and I really is an opinion because I don't have data to support this, that it's not necessarily that you can have too much grit. What you can have is grit in the absence of other key virtues. So, for example, if you're an extraordinarily gritty person who lacks judgment or humility or honesty or empathy and kindness, you can see where grit could, magnify ill effects. But I don't necessarily think that it's the problem of being a 10 out of 10 on the grit scale. Let me start off by saying that in our research studies, for many outcomes like finishing West Point, grit actually is more predictive than IQ or SAT scores. But I think the real question is not, which is more important or more predictive? What it really is important to do is to highlight the undervalued role of effort. I feel like we live in a culture where we talk about talent all the time. In fact, I once was asked to do a media presentation, and they actually even refer to people as talent, as in, has the talent showed up? Did talent show up to makeup yet? Talent has to be on in 5 minutes. So this kind of obsession we have with, whether we are or are not gifted and talented, whether we do or do not make some talent threshold is misplaced. And if anything, I would hope that my research doesn't necessarily undermine talent, because I think talent exists. I'm not a particularly talented driver, for example, but we vastly underestimate how much effort, practice, time on task really determines ultimate performance. So resilience and grit, I'm often asked the question of sort of how does resilience affect grit, or is resilience the same thing as grit? I would say that resilience, if you would define resilience as bouncing back from adversity, that would be one of the things that would be a precursor to grit. But I don't think it's exactly the same, because if you're somebody who, when things are hard, you bounce back, that is one thing that you need to be gritty, but not the only thing. You also need a passion, right? You also need something that you're really committed to working on over the long term, and being resilient doesn't guarantee that.
So does anyone have anything they'd like to say about what they learned from this video? Any feedback or comments?
I learned a new word to define what I've been doing for years.
Yes, definitely.
I like her thoughts on whether too much grit is a problem, and excessive grit. And I thought it's something to think about. That's interesting to me.
Do any of you guys teach anything about grit and growth mindset in your classes?
Yeah, I have for a number of years.
I'm
I don't-
trying to, but I just started this year.
Yeah, as a reading specialist, I work with the struggling readers at the high school level who have not passed their EOC. So growth mindset's huge for them to understand that growth is a good thing. And even though you may have failed something and we see improvement, that's what we want to see. So we talk a lot about that in my class. Any other comments before we watch the next video on grit, on implementing it?
This day for our class, because they're 3-year-olds. It's a daily thing though, and we don't call it grit, and we don't call it growth mindset, but we do say you did better today. Hey, you got a little bit closer. Or even like just opening up their milk cartons. Hey, you got closer, you tried it, you got a little bit closer to getting there, you know? So definitely, you may not actually be calling it that, or you may not have had that vocabulary yet, but you might already be doing that. So think about that.
Okay, so our next video is about implementing grit. Now for a video on some ideas on how to implement grit into your classroom.
During your life so far, what has been one of the biggest goals you set and you were able to achieve?
Well, when I was high school age, I thought that it would be...
You're going to need to pick somebody, could be a relative, could be somebody in school, it could be a neighbor who has shown grit, and your job is to interview that person. And then you're going to come back and we're going to create the perseverance walk. You're going to take us on the journey of that person who showed grit. So here's my perseverance walk for Jay. It has the goal setting part, and it has the things that got in the way. And then it has the part about I reached my goal and what is my life like now because I was able to attain that goal. So Jay Lyon joined the New London Fire Department at 18. He loved being a volunteer and helping out his community. When he went to college, his dad told him, now is the time to think about doing what you really want to do. So what's his dad asking him to do? Set that goal. Good. So what I drew on here was this desk. Notice that he's got a paper here that says D+ on it. Not so hot. But he's also thinking, I really, really, really want to be a firefighter. So I'm going to move him over. That winter, he applied and was accepted in technical school for fire science. He loved what he was studying, and he earned a 3.4 GPA. Better? Way better. Okay? But still had some struggles. So I'm going to march him along. And now where is he? He's at the firehouse, right? Earning his degree took perseverance. Becoming a full-time firefighter took grit. It took 4 years before he was asked to be the New London's first full-time firefighter. So he reached his goal of becoming a full-time firefighter. So that's a far-off goal. But now think about what his life is like now. He loves what he does. Does that tie back into what I was talking about this morning about goals and you setting your goals? He got to set his goal. It's so important, you guys, that you set your goals. Hopefully, you'll take these lessons and this will become a part of you, and then you can use it later on, right?
So any reactions to this video? Anything that you maybe were like, oh, I could do that in my class?
I'm trying to do that in my class because this is the first time that I have a group I'm able to kind of do that with. Last year I had 8th grade social studies, which is STAR tested. It's a STAR test prep class. And I had 6th grade, which is the first time we get them at our campus. And I'm the strong classroom management teacher for that grade. So they wanted me to get them all aligned with routines. This is the first year I've got a 7th grade class, and I had them last year and I know them really well. So I'm excited to try things like that, like what we just saw in that video. I don't think I would have felt comfortable deviating from my original plans prior to this year because there's so much pressure for us to, it's kind of ironic since she was talking about meeting goals. A lot of the goals that we are urged to get are all test scores. And that educating the whole child is like something that sounds great in mission statements. It sounds great when we say it in PDs, but the goals are all going to be growth on the MAP test, so that's that's my thought on it. And I've taught for a long time, but it's been so long since I felt like I had the liberty to do that at all anywhere until just this year.
Thank you for that information, James. Is there anything else that you would like to share about the video before we go on to this next activity, which kind of is the same, we're kind of starting it already. If you look at page 5 and 6 in your handbook that I have posted several times in the chat, there are 6 steps on teaching grit. So if you just take a look at that real quick, and then either put in the chat or you can unmute yourself and just tell us your thoughts on that and how you can maybe implement this into your classroom.
It reminds me of the project-based learning that we were talking about last time. Because if you remember what we were talking about, we were saying that we give them opportunity to grow. So it's cyclical. It's not ended at that time. Like just because you presented it doesn't mean that you can continue improving upon it. So that engineering model where it's okay if you didn't get like the A+, but hey, if you want to continue learning, so that's where you're kind of looking at, is it performance goal versus learning goal?
And also for me is allowing them to struggle and seeing that struggle on their face and allowing them to struggle for a little bit before you jump right in and say, oh, here's another step, or here's something else I can do to help you. Because a lot of students they're not used to being forced to struggle. They're used to just being handheld through the whole thing, especially when they get to middle school and high school. We want them to start being able to have that struggle to be able to learn. Does anyone else have any other comments about the 6 steps and how maybe it could be implemented into your classroom?
I think with the struggle, that monitoring the students' frustration level to help them avoid shutting down is an important one, because every kid has a different level depending on how much grit they have and where they're at in the process. So
Yes, and definitely knowing when you need to step in to help them. Even not just step in right away, but you kind of say, okay, I really can see that they really are struggling. Then you're like, okay, now I can go and help them. Or getting them to ask for the help too. Like, hey, I'm not understanding this. Can you help me? That type of thing too. Anyone else have any comments about this before we go on to the next part about the managerial considerations?
I was just going to say I like step 6 as well, for the student to reflect, because I was actually telling my students today, with 6th grade, I have 6th graders, and that you need to reflect on your learning and also reflect. I reflect as a teacher, like, oh, do I need to reteach this? Did everybody get this? Or, no, the majority got it. So if you didn't get it, that means you need to reflect. Was I really listening and learning? So I like that step.
Yeah, reflection is important. They don't always realize that, but it is very important to that learning process. Thank you.
Now that we've kind of talked about the group focus and avoiding satiation, which are the instructional considerations. So this has to do with what we're doing to plan for our students, right? So this is the stuff that we're doing to help them. This is about them, right? This is literally something we're doing to help them, but we're influencing them. Now, we're going to be looking at what else can affect our effective group management. And this is managerial considerations. So when you're looking at managerial considerations, we're looking at educator behaviors that can support engaging and well-run classroom. They support the instruction, but by and large, they focus mainly on just the behaviors of the educator themselves. So Koonin identified 4 behaviors that contribute to the effective management of the class. As you can see on our screen, we have the first one, which is with itness. So when we're talking about with itness, this is when you're talking about having eyes on the back of your head, right? So they used to tell us when we were younger, I have eyes on the back of my head and I can see everything that's going on in my classroom. That is what with itness is. You know exactly what's going on in your classroom, and you're making sure that you don't get just so absorbed with this one group that you're not understanding that everything else is falling apart within your classroom. You're kind of making sure everybody's okay. You're going and checking in with everybody. You know what's going on in your classroom. And we have overlapping. Koonin identified overlapping as being able to handle 2 events at the same time. So you might have one group who's working on something and another group who's working on another, or you might be able to be in the middle of your class and then all of a sudden there's a fire drill and you have to shut it down and walk them outside so that they're safe, right? So there's overlapping stuff that goes on. You're being able to, so you know what's going on in your class and you're able to handle 2 things at the same time. The next one is smoothness, which was identified as handling smooth transitions. And that would be like moving from working within your book to now writing your notes down, or going from working in a whole group to smaller groups. So that's just kind of how do you handle those transitions, or even just coming in from outside if you're in like middle school, high school, how do you handle going from, you know, one class to another? And when you're starting your day, do you have bell work? What is it that they're doing when they're sitting there waiting for instruction? What do you do when they're getting ready to leave, right? And then we have momentum, which is moving the lesson smoothly and pacing appropriately. So you're kind of trying to make sure that your students are keeping up with what you're teaching. You're not going way too fast. You're not going way too slow. Okay. And now that we've kind of looked at those managerial considerations, you can find them on page 7 of your handbook. So again, you're not looking at the actual document, you're looking down on the page number where it says Beyond Classroom Management on page 7. You can find those managerial considerations and their definitions. And that will help you with responding to the following question. What would an educator have to do to display Koonin's 4 managerial considerations in their classroom? So now we've kind of talked about those managerial considerations. What do you have to do to display them in your class? What are some things you would have to do within your classroom to show that? So we're talking about the managerial considerations we just talked about. With itness, which was the eyes on the back of your head that you know what's going on. Overlapping, which is being able to handle simultaneous events at one time. Smoothness is being able to transition from one activity to another. And momentum would be being able to go through your lessons throughout the day and making sure you're not just overly focused on one thing. And if the kids get it, you're ready to move on, right? But you're also not leaving behind those kiddos who need a little extra time with that material. What do you think we would need to do to be able to display these managerial considerations in our classroom? I see somebody, so we have Carol who answered. Hi, Brianna, shout out. Carol says overlapping, having expectations for stations so students know what is expected when you're working with a group. So you're managing like maybe your smaller group with you and then the ones who are working in individual tasks. Thank you. Anybody else?
I guess if it was me implementing one or all of these, first, I would need something that would keep me on task with it because I forget what I'm doing. Like all the time without something for me to follow because I think let me find which term it was again. Smoothness. I think it was. Nope, it was overlapping. My bad. I've got a classroom where the phone will ring if somebody wants to talk to me, and then I've got to answer the phone. And then sometimes we have walkthroughs, we have all these things that come up. Somebody drops a water canteen, it makes a loud bang. I mean, sometimes I think if I did not put everything that I need to do into the materials that I also show the kids, so it's like it keeps them focused, it keeps me remembering what I'm doing simultaneously. Otherwise, I'd something could come up and I could lose my place and then stumble around being like, wait, what was I doing? So having that structure in place for myself to be able to keep up with those aspects is something that I would need to have around.
So what I'm hearing, James, is that maybe you have structures in place already so that kids are able to manage themselves even when things happen, right? Or something hits the fan, or when there's an emergency, or somebody gets sick and throws up on the floor, right? Like their day doesn't completely fall apart because there's something unexpected, right?
I think you're about maybe 55% right, because I do have structures in place, but it's all focused on keeping me able to respond to an unexpected situation, not so much the kids being able to do it independently, because it still is all on me to be like, okay, something happened, guys. We go back, we notice it, we react to it. That's normal. We have to check and see if something's wrong. Now we know something's not wrong, so we can go back to what we're doing, so it's still it does keep me on task. The thing that I don't like about it, and maybe this is my zone of proximal development, is I want to take it to the next level where something unexpected could happen and then the kids could self-regulate without me.
And I think that a lot of that has to do, James, with so again, I'm going to go back to what I said. And you are, in order to show this, in order to display this in your class, your with itness, how do you show that you're with it in your class? Your kids know that you're watching them, right? You call them out when they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, or you're redirecting them. So when you're with it, you're going to quite literally let the kids know, hey, I know what you're doing and I see you and you're not doing what I asked you to do. So let's get back on to the program, right? And when we're talking about overlapping, the kids already know, hey, this is the structures you put in place. So when you're working in a smaller group, like Carol had said, and there's other small groups, working on individual tasks, they know what's expected, but you teach it. You're constantly teaching it, right? The momentum, when you're making sure that, hey, you know where they're at, all of this kind of builds on each other. So if you know your students, you know where they're at, you're keeping an eye on them, you are with it, you're gonna know when they're ready to move on. You're gonna know when they're struggling. You're going to know, hey, they're having a hard time with smoothness. So like, hey, like the transitions are kind of horrible right now. Like we need to practice this. Let's get back on this. Let's do this real quick. Let's clean it up and we're ready to move on to a little bit more content. So I do see what you're talking about. And I love that you said that you want to get them to a place where they can do that. But in order to get there, we have to do these things as educators. We need to make sure that we're displaying these managerial considerations in order to help make sure that we have an effective group management, right? So this is what it looks like when we have the instructional considerations. So we have the group focus, we have a way to avoid satiation, and we are displaying these managerial considerations. That's when we get to effective group management. Is there anybody else who would like to share something about the managerial considerations? Are you familiar with them and you're pretty comfortable with what we were talking about, with what they mean?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and Michelle just posted in the chat. She just got home. She wants to open the book and worksheets, but can't see them. Can you thank you, Beth. She did it. Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Now that we've talked about it and we kind of saw what those managerial considerations are, we're going to take a look at some scenarios, right? So we're going to say, is it a managerial consideration? In other words, is it something that we're focused on the teacher's behaviors? Or is it an instructional consideration? So something that we're kind of helping our students with, right? That we're planning for, that we're going to help them with. And we're going to say, is it managerial or is it instructional? Let's take a look at the first one, beginning of the day or period activity. What do you think this would be? Would it be managerial or instructional?
I think it's instructional, but maybe a little bit of both, because my beginning of the period activity is usually a warm-up, which allows them to get started on the material, but also allows me to take attendance and get my things in place.
And would you consider that something that is, would you say it's like witness, overlapping, smoothness, momentum, or do you think that it's something like avoiding satiation or group focus? If we really had to like narrow it down.
Maybe kind of a with itness and a smoothness thing, because they're all coming in, and if they have something going on right away, it allows that transition from being out in the hall to being in their seats and getting started go more smoothly.
So it's something you put in place for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not you that's doing the bell work, it's them. So is it instructional or is it managerial?
I guess it's managerial then.
I would say it's instructional because it's something that you're having them do.
I
right?
misunderstood what you were saying then.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
okay.
no, it's fine. It's fine. And I might not have spoken it correctly, but if it's something that you're having them do, then it's instructional, right? But if it's something that you are doing, you are working on, you are like actively doing this, that's your managerial considerations. So if we're looking at that one, the beginning of the day or the period activity, your bell work, that's going to be your instructional considerations. You're trying to make sure that they are avoiding satiation because they're going to sit there, you know that they're going to get in trouble or they're not going to, you know what I mean? So you're trying to give them something to do so that that doesn't happen, right? And you're trying to keep the focus on the work instead of, oh, you know what happened while we were in the hall and stuff like that. But yeah, good. And then let's take a look at number 2, using the restroom, drinking fountain, and lockers. Are you teaching them to do that, or are you kind of watching them and making sure that things are smooth and they're getting, you know what I mean? So what do you think? Would it be instructional or managerial?
The restaurant would be managerial.
And I think Dr. Lewis was going to say too. What did you think, Dr. Lewis?
I'm sorry, I didn't know if you could hear me or not. But I was just looking at that, and I think that whether it's managerial or instructional depends on the time of the year. If it's at the beginning of the year, then they're going to be managerial on the teacher's part because you're giving those instructions, and then it becomes instructional later. Instructional when you're showing them how to do it, how you want it done, when it's done, how you access these different restrooms, lunch, all of that. Is instructional, and then after you taught it to them and they begin to do it, which as the year goes on, you know, it's just this is how we raise our hand to go to the bathroom, then it becomes managerial. I think a lot of these are instructional at the very beginning of the year, and then as the year progresses, they become managerial, just making sure that they are following the process that you have already put in place for them.
And it could depend on your population, because I know in my classroom, a lot of using the restroom, drinking water, that's going to be instructional pretty much the entire year because we have kiddos who are not potty trained yet. So we have to do that kind of stuff, but also being managerial and saying, hey, it's it's time to move on. We've been here for like 20 minutes. Like it's time to move out of the potty. And Gina did say like managerial. So thank you, Gina. I did hear you say that. How about makeup work? Would it be instructional or managerial? So we're talking about something that the students are going to do, not us, right? It's not our behavior. So I would say that would probably be what?
Instructional.
I would say so too. While you might at the beginning of the year, Dr. Lewis, definitely instruct them on how to get to their makeup work. At the end of the day, makeup work would be you just managing them and making sure they know where they need to get it and stuff like that. Once you taught them that. Mm-hmm.
So then we're assuming then that they have already learned all of these behaviors, and then we're just determining where. So we're making the inference that they already have learned these behaviors. Now we just need to decide if it's practical managerial when they.
So if you've already taught them the stuff, what would it be considered, right? Would it be, so looking at like storing personal belongings, what would that be? Instructional or managerial?
Managerial.
Mm-hmm. And then what about posting assignments?
What?
Instructional.
Posting assignments. But look at who's doing it though.
Oh, this is not students posting assignments. It's
No, it's the right. And it's the instructor. So would that be managerial or would that be instructional?
Managerial.
Right, because it's not necessarily you instructing, it's just you posting the assignments.
Yeah.
How about distributing and collecting materials and assignments?
managerial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Getting the teacher's attention, what would that be? If they already know you want them to raise their hand, would it be managerial or instructional?
Instructional, because they're doing it.
Yeah. How about managing transitions between activities?
That's managerial because
Managerial.
yeah, you have to make sure that it's going correctly.
Yes. How about moving within the classroom or to other school areas?
Depends on age.
Yeah, that's true. So like I know at the beginning of the school year, we spent literally like the first 3-4 weeks learning how to hold the loops that we walk with and making sure we're not tripping over other people and not running into them. But at this point in the year, when I've already taught them how to do it, all I have to do is grab a loop and make sure we're walking, right? So would that be managerial or would that be me instructing them on it?
Instruction.
Well, I was going to say managerial because
At
you've already taught it to them.
Right.
You're just double checking and making sure that they all do it so you don't lose the kitty cat.
Right. So you're just looking at the smoothness of it, right? You're trying to make
Yeah.
sure that you're not running down the hall, that you're not causing a ruckus as you're going down the hall and not interrupting other classrooms. I'm not teaching them how to hold a loop or what I'm expecting them to do. They already know that. I'm just making sure that they're staying with it. How about checking papers, providing feedback, and grading?
Managerial. You're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I
Because
said
that's
you're.
you. That's
Yeah.
you. That's not the
Yeah.
kids, right?
uh-huh.
And what about reporting attendance and tardiness?
Managerial.
Right. So I want to just really quickly state we looked at managerial and the instructional considerations. However, procedures can also be categorized into 2 types, managerial and instructional, which is what Dr. Lewis was saying, right? And depending on the type of year, it can be instructional. But as we get closer, like as we move along in the year, it should become more managerial because those systems should be put into place. From the examples given here, I want you to kind of think about it. What did the majority of these tasks come out to? Like, what was it? Were they instructional or managerial considerations? If we've already taught it, right? The majority of them are managerial considerations. So kind of that puts a lot on us, right? So
Yeah.
the way that we behave, our behaviors, what we're doing, what we expect of our students, and how we communicate that and behave towards those behaviors that are being displayed in our classroom have a very, very big impact on what's going on in our classroom, right? And
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize.
No, you're
How long before we like the consistency, being persistent on teaching, instructing these procedures, and it's almost like they never learn it or they refuse to learn it. How long before you what happens if it's been 4, 5, 6 weeks and they're still doing the same thing? Is it still the teacher or
That's
yes?
where you might have to look at what systems you have in place, but then also make sure that you're reaching out, not just like, don't make it all just, oh my goodness, it's me. Like, reach out for help. Because if there's an instructional coach who can help you out, or if a sped coach, because I know you just said that you changed your classrooms, right? Like, you changed to a different setting. And so that might be something that you would have to reach out to, like a sped coach who could help you, or behavioral coach. If they are students who actually see anyone for ABA, anybody who comes in and does like the LSSPs, the licensed school professional psychologists, if they see them, if there's something that they do that helps them, or even the speech therapist, because if it's a student who has a speech delay, who isn't able to communicate correctly, either has a delay in receptive or expressive language, you might need to get those visuals to help them with what's going on. And it might just be as simple as using a visual that you can point to, because that would be like a lot bigger impact for them than us continuing to say it. You know what I mean? So just definitely do not shut it out. Ask for help, Gina. Reach out to those people who are already there. That's their job, to help you out. Okay? Because if you're struggling that much, it shouldn't be that much of a struggle, and they probably have something that they can help you with.
And also you have to look at whenever you switch from one group to another. Sometimes what you were doing for one, it doesn't work for the other, because their thinking isn't that same way, like the age group. And then if you have a bunch of sped in there and stuff, so their thought processes are going to be different. And so I heard someone say pish, and the kids all say posh today. And I was like, what the heck? So it was one of those command things, she was getting their attention and all of that. But my kids would never be able to process that, And so that's happened to me before. And I'm like, oh my God, what is wrong with these kids? And I was just like freaking out. And then I realized after some point, someone pointed out to me that you're teaching, the teaching, the words you're using, the behaviors you're using, it's for a different age group. It's not for the age group that you have. And sometimes you can't look at age group as the number that's on their birth certificate right now, like how old they are, because you also have to find out how old are they right now mentally. Okay. I have a 5th grader, but that 5th grader is also in a toddler stage. I've had a 3rd grader who was, 2 years old. So, or, you might just have it where I've had like 2nd graders before, but, and they weren't quite up along yet. They were still reaching in kindergarten on reading and different things. And some of it had to do with language, and some of it, was undiagnosed things yet. So sometimes you kind of just have to, when I was saying that observation, sometimes just observing what they do on their own will help you realize where they are mentally. So that will be something too, because sometimes you might have to go to something real cheesy, you know, but it's like, okay, I couldn't stand Dave and Ava. But the one little girl would only listen to Dave and Ava do the ABCs instead of Jack Hartman. Why? Because it turned out she was more of a toddler mentally than the rest of the group. So
You
yeah,
have to keep in mind that their chronological age is not always going to equal their chronological age will not always be the same as their
mental age.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be different. So we have to keep that in mind. I'm going to apologize because we usually have this really amazing, like Academy Award winning display of what we would consider ineffective managerial considerations. We can find these in your handbook and it's on page 8. We usually will ask you to read the description of it and then develop a skit about like what it would look like in the classroom. But because we're trying to make sure that we condense this down to get you guys out in time, I'm going to read what it is. And then I would like for anybody who has an example of this to share with us. So the Kunin also identified 6 behaviors that contribute. So he identified the 6 behaviors that contribute to ineffective managerial considerations in the classroom, right? So we talked about what's effective. He looked at things that there was 6 of them that are ineffective and they happen in classrooms all the time. The first one is a thrust. And a thrust occurs when the educator suddenly bursts in on the students' activities with a new statement or direction and the kids are not ready to receive the educator's message. So perhaps they're in the middle of really looking at their math and what happens? What might happen if there's a thrust?
They're gonna get really excited and upset because they needed more time.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you might be like, you might get somebody, some word or something, or you might be reading an email and they're in the middle of doing their work and they're like, oh my gosh, like you're gonna be like interrupting them in the middle of what they're doing, right? They're not ready to receive this information because they're in the middle of getting this work done. So that is not a good thing for us to be doing. We shouldn't be interrupting them.
Or can I give another example?
Yeah, go
I'm
for it.
reading I'm reading like a chat and I'm laughing out loud and the kids are looking at me like, what are you laughing at?
Right. That's just a lot of stimulation,
Go back to
right?
work.
That's a stimuli they were not ready for because they were busy over here and maybe like what we're doing is interrupting their work. All right. Next, a dangle. A dangle is when an educator leaves one activity dangling in midair to start another and never returns to the first activity. So this could possibly be you figuring out in the middle of your lesson that it's just not working. So you're like, you know what, just stop. We're going to do this instead, right? And you're going to do this so that they can clarify, but that original assignment just kind of like vanishes. It never gets back to it. Like we never get back to it. A truncation. A truncation is a variation of a dangle, except the educator never returns to the first activity or returns to it considerably later. So for example, a civics educator asks the class to get out the homework assignment, but does nothing with it for the rest of the class time, or returns to it at a point in the lesson, but forgets why the request was made anyways. Like they made you do the homework, but you never actually understand what it has to do with what you're doing. And then there's a flip-flop. Another variation of the dangle. Happens when the educator terminates an activity, starts another one, and that does something to return to the other one. So a lot of what you're kind of hearing is not with-itness, it's not smoothness, it's not any of what we talked about, right? None of these. With-itness, smoothness, momentum, right? The momentum is totally messed up when we're doing these ineffective managerial considerations, when we're displaying them. A stimulus bound event is a situation in which the educator interrupts the flow of instruction to respond to an irrelevant event or one that could have been handled just as effectively under the learning after the learning activity is over. So kind of like what Carol talked to us about when you're reading a text message and you start laughing, like you could have like waited until it was time for them to finish their work, or maybe not laugh so loud, you know, making sure that you're not interrupting their work. Overdwelling is one that's going to totally do away with your momentum. Overdwelling is spending more time on an issue or content than you need to. So if a student behavior or task or performance is interrupting and you spend a whole lot more time of your instructional time on that than you really need to, then that's not really effective either. So now that you've kind of heard some of those ineffective managerial considerations, is there anybody who wants to share something that they've seen or heard? And we're going to use aliases to protect, you know, the population out there. If you want to share something that you've seen or that you have experienced yourself, or maybe something you've done that you're like, man, that was not cool of me to do that. You know what I mean? It's okay. You can confess right now of any of these ineffective managerial considerations.
I'm glad you said that, because I don't have to keep confidentiality for this teacher, because I feel like I've seen myself do all of those at some point or another. Maybe some of them just once, but others I do it over and over again. And like something I have to be cognizant of is I think I just closed the manual, but the one where it's the teacher comes in and interrupts their train of thought where they're in the middle of something. I am so guilty of that. Like I will come along and I will like what I should do better, and I'm still bad at it. But rather than come up and start asking them questions, you know, and sometimes I feel like I've got to record myself and submit videos of me doing things for my district, because I'm on the leadership committee and we're supposed to do that. So it's like sometimes I feel like I am doing it to show people who might miss it if I don't verbalize it. And like I need to make it pretty obvious that I'm here doing this thing. And I feel like I have taken that compliance piece bad habit and started doing it even when I'm not being observed or videoing myself. And so I need to, I mean, just personally, I need to go back more towards like I kind of slide into what they're doing and insert myself into what they're doing, rather than me showing up and say, okay, so what about this? You know, and I just derail them so that I look like I'm being a dynamic teacher for the audience, you know. So that that's one thing I think that kind of stood out to me about everything we discussed.
Thank you, James, for being so honest and for definitely like letting us know we're not alone. Because I know when I first went through this, I was like, oh my God, I do a whole lot of dangling. You know what I mean? Like we get to something and then we never really like close it up. So we don't have like a culminating thing where like everything's tied in a neat bow. And had to be really conscious about like, what am I going to do to make sure that I don't do that? And so it takes a lot of like self-reflection to actually admit, hey, I do this, you know, maybe I need to work on this part. Anybody else?
Yeah, I know that I've been the culprit a few times on some of these. But like even like today, you know, a student wasn't getting something, my para kept asking her questions and all, and I would have to jump in. And then I would hear the para say, oh, well, let's turn the page. Now we are on page 3. I was like, 3? We've been on this for 20 minutes. She got an attention span of a gnat. And so that's when I realized that, okay, I need to talk to my para, because, you know, sometimes part of the problem is that, like I was saying earlier, we kept asking her, was an animal, this particular animal, live on the ocean or on the land? And she kept giving all these crazy answers. And then I was like, you know what, I think I know what this is. So when I broke it down, she could answer it correctly and make it go quicker, because I had to simplify the language. Does this live in the water or does it live on dirt? not ocean or land. So because we didn't think ahead and do our managerial or part to really look at that lesson before we started it, we were so fixated on making her get the answer. We totally wore her out by the time she got to page 4. And then I just told the lady, I said, just stop that and go on. She's half dead here. You know what I mean?
Planning for misconceptions or misunderstandings, correct. Yeah, you're right.
Because sometimes we forget that depending on what age, because I know someone's also doing pre-K and all that, which I've done before. And sometimes we have to think of the simpler words. We know the definition to a lot of words, but we forget sometimes that they may not have been exposed to it yet. Maybe just something that they would learn later, and so that's one of those things sometimes in the lessons we're trying to go too quickly sometimes because it takes a lot of time. And then it just doesn't work out because we didn't actually take the time to check that simplicity, which would make it go quicker. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. That was very insightful, Michelle. I love hearing you. Because you do actually tell us hey, look at what we're doing. And so you keep helping us to introduce what we're going to be going on to. So we're looking at educator behaviors, right? Which is those managerial considerations you were talking about. And we need inviting educators in our classrooms. So we're going to look and we're going to say, Carol, do we have, what time is it? We have about 2 minutes, and I'm going to ask you to look at page 9 of your handbook. It's educator behaviors, and you're going to scan through the reading there, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss. Okay, so 2 minutes, and you can scan, you can underline, you can highlight what resonates with you, and then we'll discuss when you're done. I know you guys are kind of finishing up reading right now. And as you're finishing up reading, I'd like to ask you to look on your screen and think, what are possible responses that an inviting teacher or somebody who's being intentionally inviting, right? Which is what the researchers called it. What would an intentionally inviting teacher say to their students when they elevate their voice, when they have a poor attitude, they're consistently not completing their homework, they have outbursts in their classroom, they don't follow the rules, they wear an offensive shirt, they slap another student, or they're constantly tardy? And so I'll invite you guys to choose one that you would like to give us a response to, and then you can let us know the response that an intentionally inviting teacher would have for that that situation?
Well, I particularly love this one because we would be doing a social story where we have small book where we read about these things. And so it's a story that's going to tell about this behavior and how it made people feel, whether they liked it, they didn't like it, what their feelings were for it. But usually when I do this in like a, oh, come here, we're going to read a book. And we all sit on the floor, we all gather together. And it's just going to be me reading a fun little book, you know, with animation and stuff. And then it's like, oh my gosh, you know, this little girl just slapped this boy. Did anybody just do that in here? Oh my gosh. June, did you like that? No, you didn't. John, did you hear that? June didn't like that. So we kind of do it that way, and it keeps it more on a calm. We don't yell and scream at the, you know, in the moment, but then we go back and we do these things and, you know, kind of role play or do a skit. But there's a lot of really cool books that, you know, pertain to these, especially like, you know, pre-K and stuff, you know, where someone still might bite. There's a great one that's called We Don't, what is it? We Don't Bite Our Classmates. It's a really cute book.
I
But
like
that's
I like the idea of the social story because we do that quite a bit, right? We do social stories, or we'll find a book that specifically is about whatever it is, right? And there's a lot of really great books out there that help regulate emotions, that help to deal with like what's going on. And even that, like, you can have them choose, like, have you seen the ones where it's like choose A or B, which one would be your reaction and what would happen? So they can go through it that way too, to decide like, hey, look, if I choose this, if I still continue to choose to hit, or if I still continue to do this one thing, this is what's going to happen. And is that something that I want? No, if I choose this, this is what's going to happen. So that's a great idea.
Well, the other aspect that I have, which I resonated with right away, is that, okay, so if you're teaching a child, you need to teach the child holistically, not just the child sitting in a chair. If you're teaching holistically, that's going to include their family. And just spending some time talking or discussing and doing things, you're going to find out more about the whole aspect. We have one that says consistently do not complete homework. I had one. The folders were never done. I was in pre-K at the time. Folders were never done. Why? She's in pre-K. Mommy came home. I had to help her clean the house. Mama came home. I said, you know what? When Mama comes home, you go grab that folder and you chase her around that house until she signs your folder. Mama asked me if I actually told her that, because she did do that. But sometimes, you know, constantly being tardy, depending on their age group, they don't necessarily always have control over that. But talking to their family, you might be able to find out why and help the family to figure out how to fix this problem. Does that make sense? In high school, tardiness to each class, junior high.
I was going to say,
a different
talk
one.
about tardiness with high school.
Yeah.
I've actually had that. A lot of my students will come in late constantly first period. So I'll have a private conversation with them and I try to problem solve with them and say, oh, I can't get up on time. Why don't we set a timer? Or it takes me forever to walk to school. Set a timer so you know what time you have to leave the house to get here on time. Because after 5 minutes, they're considered absent. So they have to be here on time. And it doesn't always work, but I try. So that's just something that I've done as a high school teacher, because a lot of these students, they're walking or they drive themselves. So they have to make sure they get, and their parents aren't home because they're working already.
So an inviting teacher would make sure that they find out why, what's going on, what's happening with you. because I want to know, like, this is not good for you to be missing class. This is not good for you to be late or not following the rules, but what's going on? So like you were saying, the kid who was flipping the desk over, and you're looking at like antecedent, the behavior and the consequences and what's going to happen from there. And then we can figure out what's going on. If they need a nap in the middle of the day, then they need a nap in the middle of the day. And it's not as easy for like everybody to be able to do that, but it's definitely something that we look at, right? We would think, hey, we were going to put the kids' needs, the kids' emotional state first before we look at they're breaking these rules. Okay, well, what's going on? All behavior is a form of communication, right? So what are they trying to communicate to you? So I totally like I thank you so much for sharing that.
Sometimes what you have to.
I'm sorry?
Oh no, someone muted me, so I thought you didn't want me to talk.
Oh no.
No, what I was gonna say, see, somebody dangled me or something. No, now I forgot what I was saying.
Oh, well,
Oh, I know what it was. It's because, like, for instance, when they come in late, we had a student who was angry all the time, right? They'll come into class and they're angry and they fuss and fight and have all of this. Well, it turned out that the student was hungry. Mom wasn't feeding them. So what we did is when that child came in, whatever time they came in, we gave them the opportunity to sit and eat to the side before we started. But sometimes then when the other kids start talking or commenting about it, you have to talk with them and they will get on board with it because it's like, okay, well, do y'all like Johnny, throwing this tantrum every day? No. Well, when we let him have his snack, then he's not throwing a tantrum. Are y'all good with that? Okay. So sometimes you also have to have that talk with the other kids to get them on board with what you have to do to get, that other child to get on.
Right? Building the community and letting everybody know that you're there to keep everybody safe and that you care about all of them. So once you have that and you let the kids know, you have a whole lot more buy-in in making sure, like kind of like what James was saying, that now that they have those responsibilities, now they have buy-in into what's going on in the classroom and they feel a sense of responsibility, not just to you as their educator, but also to the class as a whole, right? That everybody's there to take care of each other, that they care about each other, right? We kind of become our
May
own.
I ask something?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm listening to the schools that are like elementary. That sounds so good. I wish for my age group it was that simple, but I'm with 8th graders. It's not that simple. In fact, when you start talking, I just start thinking about these students that have so many issues beyond being hungry that they bring to the class, and we're teachers. And sometimes you just cannot address every single student. Right now, I have 25 students, and out of 25 students, maybe like 15 of them are special ed. Like I said, this is and I didn't choose this, by the way. They just gave it to me. And when I'm telling you, I feel like I'm at a zoo. These kids are like noise makers, getting out the chair. I mean, it's just like, and sometimes I just have to.
Has a lot to do with the fact that how we have like advisory periods and stuff like that where we're actually looking at like at stuff like that, but like we have them in my school district. We have an advisory period where they check in with those students, right? So a lot of what they're doing within that time frame is SEL work. So working on them, working on regulation of emotions, working on what's going on. If you're stressing out because you're not getting your work done, then you know what, at that time when we have that advisory 45 minutes, go check in with that teacher that you need to go get that grade up. And if you need some tutoring at that time, that's okay. So honestly, I've seen a big difference since they started doing that. Like personally with my daughter, she was stressing with the work and she was having some behavior stuff and things that were popping up just because she didn't feel seen. And she was trying to like say that she needed help, but it wasn't happening. So when we do stuff like that, like I remember like it was even like just one teacher and it doesn't take a whole lot of them. And I'm not saying that you have to know every single person's individual situation, but like reach out to them because you could be the difference for that one person. You know what I mean? Like my daughter's soccer coach was the one who kind of kept up with her, and she just so happened to be like an English teacher for her too. So that kind of got the ball rolling. And then a sped coach who also became like her teacher as well. And so just kind of those things and it makes the world of difference. I know there's other things that have also helped on a personal level, that things have changed and stuff, but definitely I know it's overwhelming. I know we're not God. I know we cannot do everything on our own, but don't ever doubt the power that you do have over the life of even a few, you know what I mean, that you can touch in every year because we're that important.
This is a good segue, Gina. You might want to come to the training that Rebecca and I are going to be doing in next Saturday on students with challenges. That might be a good
and we can keep talking.
yes. And there's going to be a link. It's through Northside AFT, but it's a virtual one, so anyone in the state can come because we're doing it virtually. There'll be a link that you can sign up for that.
And it was funny was I didn't think I needed it.
But we can definitely keep talking some more about that, and then we can generate some more ideas. But that being said, I do want to go ahead and point your attention to what used to be the way that we would handle classroom management and the way that it was seen, you know, years ago. And probably when I was going to school too, that's just the way that it was seen. It was rules, procedures, and consequences, right? Because if here's the rules, and if you break the rules, these are the consequences. This is what's going to happen to you. And then there was a hierarchy of consequences. Oh, well, if you did this, this is what's going to happen. Or if you did this, oh, you're going to get suspended. And man, if this, you're going to get expulsed, right? And then phases of classroom management and planning. So we kind of look at all of these things, and we're actually looking at all of these things becoming peacekeeping, right? This is actually what we should be looking at. This is what all of this is going to be turning into. If we have our managerial and instructional procedures in place, like we were talking about, and we're making sure that we have the group focus and avoiding satiation for the students, if we have that all in order, and then we have our own behaviors in order too, then that's going to lead us to peacekeeping in our classroom, right? For the most part. I mean, yes, you're going to have some anomalies and things are going to happen, and you might need to ask for that extra amount of help from outside sources or people who are specialists within your district. For the most part, though, it's all going to lead us to peacekeeping. And then this is going to help our students to be able to be peacemakers and peace builders, right, with other students. So I just want to kind of leave you with the fact that like our behaviors really do impact everything that's going on with our kids. So every time that we're saying this kid and that kid and blah, 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 and we're kind of trying to blame it on the fact that we have these 2 kiddos or 3 kiddos who are constantly, what are we doing, right? What are we doing to help? Are you doing everything you can? Because if you go to those specialists or if you go to those helps, they're going to ask you, what have you put into place? What have you done as far as like your instructional procedures and your managerial considerations before they come in and say, hey, you know what, like you need to do this, this, and this, because they're always going to point to what are we doing, right? And again, if you need the help, you need the help, but make sure you're doing your part. You're doing everything. You've crossed all your T's and you dotted all your I's when it comes to this. And so we look at the quotes up on our screen. In 1980, Evertson, Emmer, and Anderson said that classroom management was actions teachers take to control misbehavior or to maintain order in their classroom. So if you kind of look at it, it's looking at it from a deficit model. And then we look at 1994, where Evertson and Randolph said that classroom management is actions teachers take to create, implement, and maintain a classroom that supports learning. So in both of them, I want to point out to the fact that they're looking at actions that teachers take. But what's our focus now, right? It's not just to have somebody who's compliant. It's not just somebody to, to make sure that they're following the rules. But we're looking at creating, implementing, and maintaining a classroom that supports learning.
Okay, so for this next activity I'll take a look at your rules and consequences. I just want you to think to yourself about either rewriting a rule that you have in your classroom in a way that does not reflect an approach from the deficit model, or maybe think about 3 infractions of the consequences, how mandated that are mandated in your district. Do these consequences fulfill the research requirement of peacekeeping and peace building? This is just something to do just to yourself. This is something to think about when maybe you need to go back. Like at second semester, we usually, at least in high school, I'm sure all teachers review things, and maybe you're like, oh, we probably need to think about changing some of the rules, or if there's things not happening, how could you change it to make your classroom work better? There is a questionnaire on page 12 that you can look at your own time. We're just kind of running out of time to do a lot of these things. But there's a questionnaire on page 12 where you can look at your classroom space and indicate a true or false with the indicate true or false with the letters T or F. This is just what challenges do you face as educators in making the physical environment of our classroom supportive of effective classroom management. And that's something that you can change at any time. Like my room is in tables, so it's kind of hard to change it. But like if you have desks and you're like, and they're in groups right now, but they're not working well with groups, maybe putting them in rows for a few weeks just to get them back on task might help. So that's on page 12 of your questionnaire, of your handbook, sorry. There's just some things to think about when you're looking at your the way your classroom is run. And sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that when you're looking at those questions. And then this last piece, before we go to this last rear view mirror, in the handouts, because we really didn't touch on the handouts really, but in the handouts that I posted, there is at the end some procedures to rehearse with students. There's 2 pages of different procedures. And sometimes thinking about these, you're like, even as a teacher who's been teaching 21 years, I look at this, I'm like, oh, I don't go over that with my students. It's kind of a good thing, especially if you have new teachers on your campus. This might be something to share with them on procedures that they make sure that they're showing their students. And it's never too late to go over a procedure. If you're seeing something's not working, then you should be implementing something to help that work. That's just something to look at in the handouts. The final thing we would like you to do before you get off, and there is an evaluation you have to do as well. But I want, on the last slide, it says no learning has occurred unless behavior changes. I want you to write down somewhere on a Post-it note or in your handbook, or that what will change because of the information you learned in this session. So what is something you're going to take back to your classroom, even tomorrow, or maybe need a couple days to think about it. Next week, what's something you're going to do and change from what you learned today? This is not something you have to share out. This is just something for you to reflect on. And while you're doing that, we're going to put out the slide. Like I said earlier, we have the evaluation, but we're also going to put up a slide for a PD that my local Northside AFT is offering, and actually you will see Rebecca and I again if you do choose to come to this. It is a PD done through Zoom. It's next Saturday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Time. It's on students with challenges. So there is a slide with that, and I can put the link in the chat as well for you if you would like that to be able to sign up.
Yes, Carol, please drop it in the chat, and then Dr. Morales will send it out with the information that she sends everyone. So if they don't get to grab it now, they will get to grab it in the email that she sends out.
Yeah, what I just posted is the link to the registration. It's a Google form. To be able to get the link, you have to register, because I have to be able to pull those emails off to be able to email you out. And then we also put in the slides, we have another presentation coming up in October on T-tests, how to make your evaluation benefit you. I will personally tell you that Texas AFT does an amazing job with their T-test PD. It is something that you probably have not heard from your principals or your administration at your district. They give you a lot of hints and tricks to help you to do better on your T-tests.
Thank you, Carol, for that shout out.
No problem, Jamie. We love you and all your help.
And next week we will be back with culturally responsive pedagogy. So you should receive some information because you attended this one to register for that one next week too. Any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, Rebecca, Carol, did you have any last minute things before we let everyone go?
Thank you for coming. We appreciate all the wonderful discussion that we had tonight.
Thank you for spending your Wednesday night with us. I know you could be doing other stuff, but we really appreciate you coming in and showing that you care for your students and what's going on with them. And thank you for all the participation.
Yes, and you will receive a text message after this that has a link to the survey. Please fill that out because we do look at that information that helps guide us in the direction that we're going to go. But like I said, next Wednesday, we're going to have culturally responsive pedagogy. We would love to have you attend that one too. And I will be emailing the certificates tomorrow to you. And then hopefully our communications team will get this recording up on the Bridges YouTube page. And then Dr. Morales will email you all the good stuff from tonight. But Carol and Rebecca, thank you so much for taking time, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.